So what we'd like to do now is we'll just open up the floor for questions for any of the panelists.
We're talking a lot about family and succession and generations and the younger generation. We're trying to address land fragmentation and loss. What about family fragmentation? What are some of the most influential messages that you found to possibly bring some of those folks in within families and different cultures, different generations, different ages, that when they're really moving off away from wanting to be part of this? And to follow up, what can we do as individuals in this room in our various spheres of influence to help kind of keep this movement going and have some of those harder conversations with folks who really don't care about what we're talking about?
The first thing I'm going to say is something you're not going to want to hear probably, and that is that eventually you're just going to have to come to terms with the fact that there are going to be some family members that are disengaged. I mean, as you multiply in numbers over time, over generations, it's just a fact. Some family members are going to go their own way for their own reasons, and that is okay. Now, having said that, there are ways to, a lot of ways to try to really encourage that family unity. I mean, that's ultimately, the work that I do is ultimately about supporting family unity. That's really it, and engagement. I talked about the history mapping process. You know, Marshall could speak to it from having gone through it. I have found that is a very nice way of inviting people into the conversation, some family members who've been a little bit more disengaged and removed, inviting them into the conversation in a way that allows them to see themselves in the overall collective story of the family. So when you start to talk about some of these patterns and values and operating principles that have played out over time in your family, I have seen some really moving examples of family members who really had been all but written off by the rest of the family speak up and say, you know what, I now understand myself better. I see myself in this piece of the history. I am trying to live out that value in what I'm doing over here in this particular arena. It allows you to then start having conversations about how you bring those roles alive in your own family today. One of the things that we did with Marshall's family, and we do with many families, is talk about kind of, you know, what your passions are and how you want to bring those passions alive and roles that you might want to play within the family system. So I'm happy to speak more with you offline about that. It's one of the biggest pieces of what I do. Again, it's going to sound basic, but it's so fundamental. It's telling our stories. You know, we're human beings. It's how we make sense and meaning out of our place in the world. And we have been telling stories since the beginning of time. And so when you're allowed to tell your story and you invite others to listen to it and participate with you in it, witness it, that provides the opportunity for connection. In sometimes very surprising ways. Sometimes all it takes is for people to really feel heard and seen within their own family. The reason they seek out other spheres for affirmation and success is because maybe they're not feeling seen and heard within their own family. So let them tell their stories, invite them to.
I've heard your father, Robin, say many times that our family doesn't sell land. So you might speak to that, how many times y'all have actually sold property. And then as a working ranch, maybe offer some of the ways that your family, your sausage making events, the way you reach out to the communities through your ranch field days, your newsletter that you guys have developed. You might speak to some of that, and as a working ranch to to demonstrate how your family has educated your other members of the family who are not there on the land?
No, there's no real silver bullet answer as far as shortening that disconnect from people that are becoming disconnected. It's a million little things, a million little efforts, and living every day as far as what things you can do. Be constantly vigilant of things that you can do to include the family members that do make up the complex of the ownership that you share with them. Like Colleen said, we tried, like we're having a 130th anniversary for the ranch and an appreciation get together. We try to hold as many family functions there at the ranch as possible. Birthdays, baptisms, we try to make every single effort. It might be more convenient to hold some of these things in a different location, but you make the effort to make it work on your property, just to, as children grow up, they remember all of those different events that happen at the ranch, and it's may not be real fancy or anything like that, but it's those constant memories that you establish all throughout a child's life that I think you can't ever start too early. And riding around with my father, I was able to he was able to pass on that passion to me, and I'm doing the best with my kids. And whenever you see family members that aren't possibly getting their kids engaged, maybe somehow that's an opportunity to fill in those gaps and include them on doing different events out at the ranch or at the property. And you just can't spend enough quantity time on a piece of property to make those memories.
Somehow you've got a lot of different family members involved in a ranch. Does each one of them have a deeded portion of the ranch that they individually own? Or do you have like a family limited partnership or a corporation or something where they each own interests of the whole?
No, they all own different portions of the ranch.
Then how have you, that means that each individual can sell if he or she chooses to.
Yes.
And yet somehow you've managed to keep this all within the family or various wings of the family. How in the world have you accomplished that?
I have not. I'm just the next one that's going to, take on, a significant portion of the responsibility, and I do take the responsibility seriously because, like I said, you want all the experiences of people that own the land to be positive, and you just do the things that are within your control to make that a positive experience for those landowners. And if they don't get along, you're not going to make people get along, but you can create the environment that is conducive to people avoiding some conflict.
I guess the answer is your family has a heck of a good ethic about the land.
We try.
Okay, so if I understood it correctly, your question is, what advice do you have for the rest of the family once you've selected a leader? Okay. How to handle the rest of the family. Some of that's going to go back to how the leader was selected. So that's why, I try to place a lot of emphasis on, put the effort in on your selection process. Cultivating that trust across the family that you are actually selecting a leader whom you all do have faith in. That said, that's not always how it happens, right? So sometimes I'm brought in to work with a family where a leader is already in place through whatever mechanism or selection process, and sometimes it's just, this is somebody's child, so boom, they're it. And the rest of the family is not so happy about it. And this is where you need to start finding a way to have honest conversations, and it's delicate. I'm not gonna, it just depends on how sensitive it is. Do you want to give me any more color on it than what you have already? Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, no, it's good. If you're just starting the process, then you're in great shape because you really can be thoughtful about how you select your leader, and then once if you've done it correctly, and because you're thinking about it, I feel sure you will, then you will have that broad base of support. Make sure you put in place those processes for giving that leader feedback. So people get very antsy, very nervous. They start to assume, fill in blanks that they shouldn't if they don't feel like they have a way to give the leader feedback. So make that feedback a two-way process.
And we've got 4 boys, and so we recognize right now that we need to encourage the dynamic of the 4 of them getting along and respecting one another. But I'm wondering, from your experience, as they get older, is it, knowing that they're going to have different talents, is it a more successful scenario if you're defining those roles and giving them kind of a job description that comes with a title and responsibilities? Or is it more successful if you try and encourage them to work as a team and not have one individual responsible for particular job duties? What do you find to be more successful?
What is the age band of that generation?
Well, one's 4 and one's 14.
Okay, all right. Well, and that's typical too. Is the span generation to generation gets larger to the point where you really sometimes stop thinking about it in terms of generation and really more in terms of age bands. My inclination is to say if you lock them into a specific role, that's a little more fraught. You run higher risk there, unless it's really, really clear that this is what they love. It's a marriage of their passion and their natural or cultivated abilities. In general, I find that it's a good idea to give the next generation the opportunity to move around your operation, your family enterprise, and understand the various components of it. It will only make them better leaders in whatever role they end up in.
Just real quick, I want to go back to the Texas Beef Council video and sort of paint a picture that I think is probably pretty common. Let's say that John has a sister, and she may be incredibly successful. She may not be. She may have had some bad breaks along the way. And looking at the dad, the patriarch, I know, he wants to be fair. I just think that's a very common situation. Can you discuss her perspective on this whole issue?
What we do in most cases is come in and I, or if I'm working as a dad with Marshall's family, with a colleague, we interview each adult family member one-on-one. These are confidential interviews, and they last an hour and a half, sometimes multiple hours. But the point is to do exactly what you've just said. The point is to understand each family member's perspective, their hopes or dreams about the family, about their own role within the family, their concerns, what keeps them up at night, what's really bugging them. I mean, we get the whole picture. We don't come back to the family and betray any of those confidences. It's incredibly, we are vigilant about keeping those confidences in place. However, we can help paint a picture, of a composite picture of what you're dealing with, and then help to facilitate conversations that allow the rest of the family to get a window into the various perspectives that exist. One of the hardest things to do is to come to terms with the fact that one sibling is less competent in this particular arena than another. And we don't, we work very carefully on appreciative inquiry is one of the principles that we operate from, which simply means that we are focused on the positive. So everybody has their really strong strengths, and a family it really is a prism that is made stronger, more beautiful by being able to literally look in through every single facet of that prism. So through the process, we do that, and sometimes it takes a long time, but ultimately, again, I come back to, if each individual has felt seen and heard, you're a whole lot further along in your ability to have those make those tough choices about who's going to lead the next generation than if you just try to shut those conversations down.
And I'll just add just a quick antidote to that. From participating in that process of the interviews, we have a far-ranging aspect of people in my generation, from very little interest in being involved right now to a whole lot of interest. And from different life backgrounds and experiences and skills. And so doing these interviews, it kind of gave us an opportunity to really be honest about where we are in our life and what we would like to see in the future. And then that really was able to be synthesized during our process. So I think that's in some format, whether it's through a consultant or through some other way to do that, I think is really important.